Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, the question we're going to ask today is, are you a franchise player? I was with two different franchises, so we're going to talk about that today. But by the end of this, you're going to know, should you be a part of a franchise or should you not? The do's and the don'ts. My friend Lance is going to be dropping some serious knowledge bombs. If I have questions about franchises, he's the dude that I go to. He's a podcast host, franchise expert. Lance, brother, welcome to the show.
Richard, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Hey, when two East Coast boys can get together and talk, it's fun. I want to give a shout out to Deven, brother. Deven, thank you so much for hooking us up. Finally, we've been working on this for a while, but we finally got together. Thank you, Deven Rodriguez. And guys, before we even get started, I'm going to thank our sponsors, David Nordell. He actually gets CEOs and veterans and puts them together to make sure that we can rock in the new economy. Because the best, if you're going to have an employee, the best employee you can ever have is a veteran. Because you know you're going to be on time, you're going to be early, we're going to work late, we're going to get the job done. And if you hire a disabled veteran, you can get up to $14,000 a year tax credit. And then if you need anything done for disabilities, walkways, the government pays 100%. So guys, if you want to hire somebody, hire a veteran. And you want to know how to do that, write veteran down below and we'll get that information to you. So Lance, my brother, before we get started, let me ask you, the first question is, what is your definition of resiliency? Because since you've been in the business world a long time, so you've seen what happened in 98, you've seen what happened in 2008, then 2020. So what is your definition of resiliency?
My definition is look at Rocky Balboa. Rocky, the classic eye of the tiger. You have to get up. You have to get up, bruised, battered. This is why, Richard, business plans are written in pencil. It's always great to plan, but when you hit a wall and you have problems and obstacles, opportunities, as we love to call them, you rewrite the plan, but you have to keep going. It's okay to fail. Just don't make the same mistakes over and over again.
So, I guess, like Mike, another New Yorker said, Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
That's right.
So talk to us a little bit about, because you're East Coast, like I said, Strong Island, Brooklyn. So tell us a little bit about where you come from, where did you grow up, and how did you become the force that you are today and what you're doing?
Absolutely. Yeah. And my accent is disguised. When I have a beer or a cocktail, my accent comes out like I'm back in Brooklyn. The reality is I'm a West Coast guy now. I live in Vegas. I worked on Wall Street for the family business. I was one of those fortunate guys, Richard, that grew up with a family of immigrants that grandpa was from Poland, Grandpa Izzy barely spoke English. I didn't even know what he said most of the time. He seemed angry a lot. He was a carpenter from the old country. He built a supermarket empire starting from a corner bodega in Brooklyn. Built 11 supermarkets in the old days when nobody knew what the heck a supermarket was in the 50s. My other grandfather was a real estate mogul, real estate attorney. He was an Army veteran, by the way, and he was amazing, but totally different than Grandpa Izzy. That was Grandpa Hyman. And Dad was on Wall Street. Dad's company was the largest over-the-counter trading house on Wall Street. He was a partner. He was with that firm forever. So I'd like to say that I got to see the three pillars of investing unfold at my kitchen table every day: real estate, Wall Street, and business ownership. And I worked for Dad on Wall Street, got handed that job. I was smart enough to do the job, but I got handed the job and I realized after college, and I was out of college, sitting on a trading desk, this is boring shit. This isn't for me. I had another uncle that did well in tech before anybody did anything with tech. He called me, he said, I heard you're bored. I want to build $1 billion franchise group. I said, I have no idea what you're talking about, but worked my ass off through college, working at bars as a bouncer. I'm a guy that always loved to work since I'm 14. The flea market in Long Island, sell sweatshirts, whatever the heck it takes. I was very, motivated, very gritty, as my friends used to say. Bottom line is, I moved west. I joined Uncle Steven, and we built a TGI Fridays franchise empire from nothing to 225 million a year in about 5 years. A lot of acquisitions, and we built multiple stores as well. And it was a hell of a freaking education. He was a Brooklyn guy, obviously much older than me. I got to hear him negotiate leases. I got to learn things I never even thought I'd know until I was maybe 40 or 50. So I got that advanced degree. But I was with him 5 years. He went back to Asia to build other companies. But $225 million a year, the average Fridays we had doing 2.5 million or so in revenue. Now, Richard, that's a $2 beer. Remember in the old days, a $2 beer, not on happy hour. Pretty incredible, good times. So I fell into owning my own businesses, and we could talk about the in between there. But I left TGI Fridays and Steven when he got distracted, and I said, let me go do my own thing. I eventually became a franchisee of Wingstop restaurants, Krispy Kreme donuts in 2 states, created my own brands from scratch, yeah, even on a part-time basis, and sold them. And I fell into being a franchise broker. You know, when you're successful at something, you want to coach now. So I want to coach other people on being a franchise owner because there are some amazing franchises out there. Richard, not all franchises are created equal. We know that. So today I'm a franchise broker. I represent about 800 brands in virtually every industry. You don't have to be a millionaire to own a franchise. I have financing lined up from many, many banks. Typically, you're going to put 20% down. And I have tons of franchises, 200,000 or less. And I also set up franchise systems for people that have successful businesses. And it's an amazing way to grow your business. I just had a guy, home service brand, exit his franchise, small franchise, for 30 times cash flow. 30 times. Exited with 90 million bucks. Wasn't even that big of a company. So franchising has never been hotter. And I'm here to talk about it.
All right. So as you see, I'm writing stuff down because I do have a traumatic brain injury. So if I don't write them down, I'm going to forget. Let's talk about TGIs for a second because my wife used to love TGI Fridays, and now a lot of them went the way of the dodo bird.
Yeah.
And something you said earlier, I lost 80% of my vision about 3 years ago. So my hearing got a lot better, not according to my wife. But you said your friend Steven, he got distracted. And now I'm a big sports guy. I'm a big sports freak. And it seems like the people that stay successful, they don't get distracted.
Yeah. Well,
it's until they start having that shiny object syndrome, thinking, okay, I'm great at this one franchise. I'm going to start going to something else. And then they put all their eggs in that one basket and lose it all. Because that's what happened to me. I was with a franchise, my GNC franchise. We were crushing it. Then COVID hit. And then not only that, but he bought into a gym franchise, realizing that since the day they opened, they didn't even have enough people to cover the rent. And then when COVID hit, he lost everything. If he would have just focused on the one franchise, because we were doing $1.5 million a year on that one franchise, but he got greedy and he got caught. So talk about that. Sometimes people, like I'm a big football guy. Peyton didn't start branching out until he retired.
Yeah.
Brady didn't stop branching out until he retired. John Elway didn't really start branching out, even though all of them owned franchises while they were playing. Playing was their main focus. The franchise was off season.
Yep.
So talk about focus.
Yeah, it's funny. I got handed a couple of Dallas Cowboys that are looking at franchises, and that's another story because the off season hasn't happened yet, and we'll be having meetings and calls during the off season because they're obviously still focused right now. Uncle Steven wasn't actually distracted. It was probably a poor choice of words that I used. He's one of the smartest guys ever. and he had tons of money from building a huge tech company in the old days. TGI Fridays was probably a pet project to him to build a $1 billion franchise. He made it to the $225 million mark. What ended up happening was, in a franchise, you got to pick your horse, so to speak, and you got to pick the right brand, just like a marriage. And Fridays had incredible leadership. But I'll never forget, I was on our committee for research and development, and there was quarterly meetings in Dallas, where the corporate office was for TGI Fridays. And I'll never forget, I was there early. I sat there at the table in the tasting room, the chef's kitchen, and the corporate chef threw a bunch of French fries in front of me, hot out of the fryer. And he said, "What do you think?" And I go, "They're French fries." He goes, "Taste." So I taste, and he goes, "Almost as good as our current fries, right?" And I go, "Well, almost, but not as good." He said, "Those are the new fries." And for those listening that are, I'm 57. In the old days of TGI Fridays, virtually everything was fresh. Quality was amazing. And they were known for their homemade fries. Needless to say, this was symptomatic of the downfall of this particular franchise. They went chasing Chili's and Applebee's to cut costs, and thereby, they didn't know, sales slid, the leadership changed. It was a shit show, and it was a terrible story. So when you pick a franchise, you got to pick the right one, and you gotta understand what the future is. Now, look, if you're a franchisee of Fridays in the old days and you see this happening, sell quickly, move on, take your money off the table, and go elsewhere. It's like when a table gets cold. I live in Vegas. If you're a gambler, the table gets cold, take your money off, right?
Yeah, but me and my wife used to go to TGI Fridays just for the salad bar. The salad bar was freaking amazing. We would just go out of our way like 30 miles just to go to the salad bar. And I guess because that's what they were known for. But then it kind of got fancy, and then it just went the other way. But now I wanted to talk about, because I live in a town, and I got a Burger King, I got a McDonald's, and I got a Wendy's. Wendy's and McDonald's are always booming, always. And Burger King, they have the most commercials, but the least amount of customers.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand how they're even making it. Because if I drive by Wendy's, it's always wrapped around people waiting to get in.
Yep.
And I prefer the burgers at Wendy's. But I'm a big franchise guy, and I realize McDonald's doesn't make the best hamburgers. They just have the best systems.
Yes.
So talk about, why some of them like Wendy's and McDonald's are really, really successful. And I think Burger King is just hanging on.
Yeah. There is a franchise for everything. Obviously, the restaurant franchises, the quick serve restaurants, QSR, are very visible. Salons like Great Clips and Supercuts and Sport Clips and things like that as well. Very, very visible because they have a retail presence. There are so many franchises we never even see. But at the end of the day, like anything, I compare everything to a marriage. I could have picked a wife that was a princess in another country, I guess, if I wanted that lifestyle or was lucky enough to get that. Similarly, in franchising, you have a lot of options. I didn't pick, my first or second wife. I didn't pick, women that were rich. I picked women that I loved. There's a passion that people initially fall in love with in the restaurant business. And also, Richard, it's availability. McDonald's was the first to make it everywhere. And after that, you had Burger King. But Wendy's, to your point, surpassed Burger King in their success and their sales. Burger King was the laggard. You hit it on the head. Burger King, I don't know. To this day, I don't know that I can still get a good cup of coffee through a Burger King drive-thru in the morning. It's been terrible the last however many times I've been there. McDonald's had that figured out. They have a better system. But here's the beautiful part about franchise exploration, about marriage. Hopefully you go in with your eyes wide open. You have that first coffee date when I introduce you to a brand. You have another date, so to speak, over the phone, Zoom calls. You eventually go and visit the franchise. So every brand produces a franchise disclosure document that has 23 points to it and a fat document that looks like a mortgage. It's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo. Franchising is regulated by the federal government, the Federal Trade Commission specifically. So there's a lot of steps and a lot of integrity in the franchise process. But to be honest, people work with me because there's a ton of brands I would never touch. I just wouldn't touch. They're not good enough for my clientele, my friends and family to invest their money.
And and unfortunately, as times change, franchises change. Like I was with GNC for over 30 years, franchises, and I was like, oh man, I can't wait to have the money to buy and the credit to buy my own franchise. You could give me a GNC franchise and I wouldn't take it. Because
Yeah.
I know that, hey, I can go to Amazon, I can order my pre-workout at 6 a.m. I'll have it here by noon. Why should I even have to go out? And one thing I did not like about the GNC franchises, and most franchises, you have to follow their structure because that's why they're a franchise. But
Yeah.
GNC wouldn't let you go and start your own Facebook page, Google page, and all that stuff.
Yep.
And then you don't feel like, if you're a free thinker,
Yes.
you shouldn't even get into a franchise to begin with, because that's why franchises, it's kind of like the military. They have a certain way of doing something. Just like every McDonald's you go to, they all look the same.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
a lot
Richard,
of guys, like when you get out in the military, they all I want to start my own business, but then they want to start a franchise, but then they realize there's really not a lot of wiggle room in a franchise. So talk about the positives and the negatives of franchise ownership.
there is no doubt that there are people that are not wired to own a franchise. They always have another idea. They always think they're better. Your ego is not your amigo. And there is nothing wrong with
I'm going to
doing
write
something.
that down. I've never heard that. I'm going to write that down.
Your ego is not your amigo. And Richard, there are a lot of people that do not want to be told what to do. And a franchise is not a good choice. I'll give you a story recently. I had a CPA, older guy, smart, referred to me by somebody, owned a bunch of real estate. He thought it would be a good idea to put a bunch of franchises in one of his shopping centers that was newer, which every operator in America wants recognizable brands in their portfolio, better for their exit strategy. And he he was late to 2 phone calls with a particular gym brand. And they kicked him out of the process. And I begged them to get him back in the process. And eventually he got kicked out again. He had such an attitude about him. And I finally told him, I said, his name's Michael. I said, Michael, you're not fit for a franchise. Do your own thing, because nobody's going to accept you with the attitude that you have. You didn't even apologize that you're late. But at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with starting your own business. The reality is this. I've worked with people that have 25,000 cash, or recently a guy worth 800 million bucks that already created his own brands. And everybody is looking for a streamlined approach, because the only resource that we all have today that is the most precious, I should say, besides our health, is our time. So I was talking to a guy recently, has an air conditioning company. He says to me, why would I be part of a franchise system? I said, how much do you do in sales? Because I did about 750,000 last year. How long did it take you to get there? Took me about 9 years. A lot of struggling, but took me about 9 years. What if I told you, I said to him, what if I told you that my favorite air conditioning franchise, if you didn't do 750 in the first year, they would probably want to kick you out. You're probably going to do $1 million the first year. And the average franchisee is doing 3.5 million. So you join a franchise system because multiple brains, multiple heads are better than one. Nobody ever built an empire completely by themselves. But if you think you can, by all means, do your own thing. Don't do a franchise. But if you're looking at opportunities to make it easier and quicker for you to build generational wealth for your family, sure, buy some rental properties, do some fix and flips, buy and holds. Also explore Wall Street, good diversification, throw some money in the stock market. although it's pretty high right now, which is great that I'm in. But business ownership is an amazing place for you to invest. Could be
Now,
the spot for you.
now my friend he's my best friend. He's actually my mentor. His name was Kumar, and he owned GNCs. But the mistake I think he made is he branded it Kumar's GNC. So eventually, if his car wasn't in the parking lot, people were driving by. They weren't coming in because they knew
Yeah.
he wasn't there. The money wasn't going to be there. But I think that's one good thing. If you go into the mindset of, okay, I'm going to get a franchise, it's going to be a faceless franchise. I'm not the face of the franchise.
Yes.
The business is, and
Yes.
it gives you a little bit of leeway. But once you say it's Kumar's GNC and he's not there, the people aren't coming in, then he doesn't really have a scalable business anymore. So talk about that. If you're going to be a franchise, not to be the face of the franchise.
100%. In fact, Richard, it's a good kind of segue because one of the most popular and growing segments of franchising, because years ago, there was a lot of owner operators, a lot of what people listening would call buying a job. Well, I don't want to buy a job. I don't want to have a trade type business, air conditioning or electrical or plumbing, the classic chuck in a truck, stand in a van. But at the end of the day, those gentlemen, they still have a business. They don't have a boss. They get to work as hard as they choose to work. My opinion, better than having a job. But the biggest segment of franchising today is what we call a goofy franchise term we call semi-absentee ownership, which means you keep your day job if you still have one, or you focus on your other businesses, hire somebody, hire a manager or GM type to run your franchise. And there are brands that have the appropriate systems in place. Remember, there's enough guys that are around my age. There was no technology years ago, and you had to do everything without computers in the old days. The reality today is with all this technology, there's learning management systems, there's all kinds of training guides, videos. So there is so much help and support. And don't forget the collaboration you get from existing successful franchisees. Franchising is like a mastermind. When you get into the right one, if you need help, you have guys that are worth potentially 30, 40, 50 million dollars in some of these big trades franchises that are willing to help you and support you when you have your troubles either staffing up, I mean, whatever it might be. But semi-absentee ownership, you cannot be the face of the business because by franchise definition, you're working on the business 10 to 20 hours a week, not in the business. Maybe you're reviewing financial statements. Maybe you're doing interviews via Zoom for staff. Maybe you're having a meeting with your GM, but you're not necessarily required to be at the business frying French fries.
But I also think that when somebody owns a franchise, they're like my grandfather says, they get too big for their britches. And if I'm a one franchise owner and I see somebody at a convention and he's got 30, 40 franchises, I'm going to ask that guy, can I take you out for dinner? Can I buy you some drinks? Can you teach me what you're doing?
Yep.
Because I got one. I love what I'm doing, but I want to know how. Because like for me, I was playing poker with one of the owner of the largest Florida timeshare company in the world. And we were playing poker and I said, all these people, they're coming buying you drinks, getting you drinks. And he's like, yeah, but they never asked me how I did it. They asked me for jobs. They asked me for loans. They asked me for this and that, but they never asked me how I did it. And I don't see why, even like podcasters, I consider myself a small podcaster, even though we're in the top. But I see people like Gary Vaynerchuk, Ed Milet, John Lee Dumas, and I'll reach out and I'd be like, hey, guy, when you're in Jersey, I want to take you out for dinner. Show me what I don't know. I know what I know. I don't know what you know. So I'm willing to take you out, humble myself, and ask you to teach me. But I see a lot of franchise owners, they got all the answers. And I'm like, if somebody's got 40 and you got one, they got the answers. You don't have the answers. So talk about that and being teachable is the question. How do you become teachable as a franchise owner?
I, I love that you brought this up because being teachable, being coachable, always wanting to learn more is a skill. It's a focus that you have to have. I used to tell people that I spend 10% of my time innovating, whether it's my personal health and my workouts or whatever it might be, because I come from a family of bad genetics and I'm not going to let bad genetics affect me. I'm going to do whatever I can to be proactive. And I did the same thing in my business as well. Funny story, John Lee Dumas, I was on Entrepreneurs on Fire. And before the episode, for those listening, and you probably know he lives in Puerto Rico. So I
Yep.
was in Puerto Rico and I called John before I went to Puerto Rico. I said, hey, can I stop by your house? He goes, absolutely. So we spent 2 hours with him and I felt bad. He didn't say anything, but I felt bad that all I did for 2 hours, Richard, is exactly what you just said. John, how the heck did you do this? I know you started, 12 years ago or 2012 to be exact. And, you have all these sponsors and you're making 160,000 a month and you publicize it on your website. So at the end of the day, the best entrepreneurs are hungry. They're craving knowledge. They want to be better. Life is about continuous improvement. If you're not improving, you're sliding. And at the end of the day, being part of a franchise network, I mentioned it earlier, is like being part of this amazing mastermind. When you are going through the franchise discovery process and you tell me, Lance, I really like that air conditioning brand you were talking about. Well, guess what? You'll have an opportunity with every great brand before you ever give any money and join the brand to do what we call validation. You want to validate not only what I said, what you see in the franchise disclosure document, and what you might have heard from all the corporate individuals that you've spoken with. And you're going to speak to franchisees. How long have you been in the business? How many locations, territories do you own if it's air conditioning as an example? What's your exit strategy? Would you do it over again? All these things. And you will learn very quickly. I was a Wingstop franchisee. I was a top franchisee. It's a hot brand. I was even president of the Franchise Advisory Council. I had a guy that was an attorney on the council, another guy that owned multiple other restaurant brands. I was president. Why? I'm the squeaky wheel, so to speak, from Brooklyn that made a lot of noise and always complained about everything, but was willing to, perform and do the things that I needed to make the brand better. Because when I was at Wingstop, chicken wing prices were through the freaking roof.
Mhm.
Haven't come down much either. But we diversified the menu at that point. It was a precarious, awful, stressful time because every time chicken wing prices moved a nickel a pound, that was $5,000 a month extra I would write a check for. So at the end of the day, together in this brand, we figured it out. Now it's one of the top brands today.
All right. So now, like I said, I pay attention to every word that you say, and I actually count certain words that you've said already. And you've mentioned exit strategy 4 times already.
Oh, okay, good.
And the reason why I bring that up because I had a gentleman on, and he used to be part owner of the who was it? Oh, Texas Rangers, and he was in the field, oil field business, and he says we would not even put a drill or a rig down if we didn't even have an exit strategy before we even put the rig into the ground. And I think a lot of people, when they start a business, they have no idea. They're just going to go nilly-willy. They're going to, they're not going to have an exit strategy. So talk about having an exit strategy before you even pay the first bill.
Yeah. And the beauty of the exit strategy in franchising is you could look at the roadmap or that template that's before you. I have a garage door brand. The guy just exited for $100 million. $100 million. Garage door brand. He didn't know anything about the garage door business when he started buying territories. And he probably didn't have an exit strategy that he was going to exit for $100 million. But he did have a strategy initially that he was going to buy multiple territories. He wasn't going to buy a job. He was going to buy multiple territories. And my average clientele is buying multiple territories of something. What they don't know is whether they're going to grow their empire by adding to that empire. For example, I have a buddy that owns 19 Great Clips hair salons. He was probably like your average listener, 45 years old, and he didn't have a business, though. Most of your listeners probably have a business of some kind. And he got a $200,000 SBA loan and got into one Great Clips hair salon, eventually 2 and 3. And now he could exit for an awful lot of money, has a tremendous cash flow, believe it or not, off of that. So some people aren't necessarily planning for how many territories and which brands. I have multiple friends that own multiple different brands. I have a buddy of mine in franchising 30 years. He has barely exited anything in 30 years. He keeps collecting brands and locations. He bought 2 restaurants in Indiana, I think, a few months ago. He doesn't even have any other businesses in Indiana. But what you have with franchising is a system and an ability to take care of those businesses. And I don't want to make it sound so complicated for the listeners, because at the end of the day, what I show people, if you've never had a business, the first step in your exit strategy is to find one great brand that you can buy multiple territories for. You already know the average sales from your due diligence process that I will help you with and is in that disclosure document, typically. If not, I'll show you how to find it out through the validation process. So you can figure out, all right, I'm buying this franchise, I'm investing $150,000. And in 5 years, if I wanted to, with one territory, I could probably exit for 800,000 if I hit my mark. Well, 5 years, 800,000. All right, that's maybe not it. Well, then you need to buy more territories. You need to hire more people. So we kind of work backwards to what everybody's goal is. My first question with people, Richard, what's your goal? Some people tell me I've made as much as $150,000 a year in my lifetime. And I would like to be able to buy some businesses, maybe as little as $150,000, and retire by selling that business for $1 million. And then I say, okay, great. Start with one franchise for about 150,000, 200,000. I'll get you a loan. And then it'll be a brand that you can expand within. Potentially, we can get you first rights of refusal if you don't have enough capital to reserve future territories. I had a client call me back and say, I love this brand you got me into. It was a home care brand. Talk about seniors. Every day, another 15,000 baby boomers are turning 65. Incredible franchise category in senior home care. He just bought his second territory. He couldn't believe it. He didn't think he'd be ahead of schedule, but he's ahead of schedule, thrilled as can be. So it's really working into what everybody's goals are. Not everybody cares about being a billionaire. People are just satisfied with, made some money in my lifetime, happy to exit for $1 million. And then there's plenty of other people, friends of mine, if they don't exit for 20 million plus, they're disappointed. Hopefully that answers it.
Yeah, but I also think from experience is you have to do your due diligence, obviously. You have to know your analytics. You have to know your margins. Like with GNC, they took 10% off the get, and then you had to buy everything from GNC. So they're crushing you either way. And then whenever they had to do a new POS system, that's like an extra 10 grand. So, you really have to focus on your analytics from even before you get into it. Be like, okay, well, if I got to buy all their stuff for me, they're making a profit. And then if I got to give them 10% off the top, they're making that money. So I got to really figure out where my margins are at for growth.
Yeah, you want to talk about that for a second? Because there are some brands, basically all brands are supposed to disclose that. The idea of franchising is that with this group purchasing, whether it's Subway or GNC, is that you should be able to do better and have better deals through this purchasing network because of the power of the brand. Whether it's a Coca-Cola contract in a restaurant like McDonald's or Pepsi, there are always rebates for those carbonated beverages. And the rebates typically go to the franchisee. Sometimes they go to the corporation, the franchisor, to be used in the marketing fund. Those are things that are supposed to be laid out clearly within that franchise disclosure document. And those are things that you can sniff out in the process of due diligence, especially in the validation stage with existing franchisees. So remember I mentioned that air conditioning guy earlier that was an independent doing $750,000 a year. It took him like 8 years to get there. So when I told him that the average franchisee in my favorite air conditioning brand, similar to what he created, is doing $3.5 million, I said to him, "Are you okay paying a 6% royalty if you're doing $3.5 million?" He goes, "Hell yeah." Well, that's the difference. Joining a franchise isn't about fees per se or mandates. It's about having a better business as a group than you would have on your own. But you have to find the
All
right
right.
franchise.
So then let's talk about that, because I'm always playing the devil's advocate, 'cause
No,
I'm always learning, and that's why I'm so grateful to be able to have you to come on today. At one
my pleasure.
point in 2000, before COVID hit, we were doing 1.4 million a year. Then COVID hits, and then Amazon hits. So you go from having a $1.4 million business, now you're back down to $400,000 a year.
Yeah, and that's
So
terrible.
and who's going to buy it? Nobody's going to
Yep.
buy your franchise because nobody
Yeah.
wants it. It's pretty much worthless. So what do you do when you're in a situation like that?
Yeah, and it is unfortunate when I go through the process, the due diligence process with my clientele. It's all about being very careful. Virtually every single person that I speak to, at some point in the conversation mention, I would like something that's a need, not a want. I want something that's recession proof, recession friendly, recession resistant. And most franchise brands are pretty recession friendly, if you will.
Mhm.
Now, we mentioned Fridays earlier. We're talking about GNC. There are some brands that aren't paying attention when they should be. And a lot of that is easy stuff to spot when you're doing your due diligence. And as a franchisee, you still need to be on guard to what is changing. So if I were a GNC franchisee, of course, it's easy to say right now, Richard. If I were a franchisee many years ago and technology changed, I would be pushing GNC for that e-commerce portion. If people that are ordering in my zip code, because every franchise, you own a radius, you own a territory.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I have people that live within my zip code and they're ordering product from the GNC website, guess what? I want a piece of that. That's only fair. And I have brands today in women's clothing, used handbags, a lot of retail related things. That's what they're doing. And it's a great business. But that is something you have to pay attention to. It's just like that marriage that might have been great for years and all of a sudden it's not. Sometimes people don't see it. And that's the same thing with a franchise in a specific industry. That's why I put my people in a lot of home service brands that aren't going anywhere. And, when you do validation with existing franchisees, this is stuff you're going to hear about.
Something that, because I go to the franchise conventions here in New Jersey at the Javits Center. I go
Yeah.
all the time. I walk the floors. And one thing I'm really starting to notice is that a lot of franchise owners, I guess they'd be franchise owners,
Yeah.
they're willing to do a lot of stuff for veterans, even like so many different franchising options for veterans, helping with the down payments. So
Yep.
talk about that. So much stuff that they're trying to help get veterans into the franchise.
It's amazing. 14% of franchise owners today are veterans. There's a great veterans organization called VetFran, VETFRAN.org. There are a ton of franchise brands, franchisors, that are giving discounts on the franchise fees. There are lenders that are doing all kinds of great incentives. I have one particular lender does a tremendous job for veterans. A lot of times the SBA will either waive fees or reduce fees. It's different promotions, different points. But, I think you said it earlier, veterans are used to following a system. They're used to working hard and franchising. The amount of veterans I work with, I'm guessing about 25% of my clientele happens to be veterans. I have a husband and wife, both veterans. Actually, one is still active duty. And they bought a waste management franchise in Virginia from me. And they're crushing it. They're the number one franchisee. And one of the things that I do for people, Richard, I give free coaching, mentorship, if you will, to all of my clients after they buy a franchise. I was a top performing and top 1% franchisee at a couple of brands. So I share. And you know what? My Brooklyn attitude, you know what I did for a recent franchisee? He was having a little bit of a communication problem with someone at his corporate office. And I called some of the people that I know at that brand. And I dropped a couple of F-bombs and said, this guy's amazing. I don't know why he would be upset about this, but you guys need to figure this out, because I'm not sending you any more people anymore until you figure this out, because this is a bunch of bullshit. So that's what I do for my clients. They got through it, though. It was fine.
All right. So let's talk about it, because I just wrote that down. We're both East Coast boys. I'm a Yankees fan. My wife's a Mets fan. But like we're talking about, what's the difference between the top 1% of franchises and the bottom 99%?
Well, let me tell you. I got a little technical glitch over here on this end. I'm not sure what's going on. Hold on one second. Sorry. There we go. Perfect. I think I hit a chord. So what's the difference? The difference is, look, it's not the size of the brand. It is truly all about leadership. Several of the examples that we used earlier were all about, paying attention to trends. If there are trends, there are tons of brands that I have, Richard, that got PPP loans for all of their franchisees through their attorneys, their accountants, whatever it might be. Not all brands are created equal. I probably said that earlier. I say it often, but franchising is all about modeling success. So when you're in this due diligence process, you're going to discover which brands you fit or you don't.
No. My question was, what made you the top 1% of the brand?
Oh, sorry. My apologies.
So what disseminates the top 1% from the other 99%?
I honestly think
in the same niche that you were in.
So sorry. Got it. So I was distracted by my technology faults here. The bottom line is, it is paying attention to detail. And I'll tell you, I think my answer all the time to this type of question is people. I learned to be very good with people. I was a great boss. Let's just say I always wanted to have an amazing culture from my employees. I gave everybody what they wanted. In the hiring process, I always asked people what their dream schedule was. And especially, this is the restaurant business we're talking about, Richard. I had a lot of young kids, college kids, retired people, whatever. And I asked people what their dream schedule was. And look, I had some people that say, I have this, I have that, I need these days off. I respected the heck out of their time. So I hired a lot of part-timers and expanded them as I needed to. I could tell you stories for days on my hiring practices, but at the end of the day, I found people, preferably, that were employed through my network. And there's an old saying, if you go check somebody's habits out while they work and you see them doing a great job, for example, you walk into a Starbucks, you see somebody that's a stellar employee, guess what? They're probably going to be a stellar employee for you, right? So those are, I could tell you all kinds of tricks, but for me, it was learning to be an amazing boss, learning to listen to my staff. And because at the end of the day, every business in franchising really starts with the systems, the processes, the procedures, but it's all about the people. All about the people.
Now we're going into, I think today's the 27th or December. So we're going into a new year. And of course, everything changes. Like GNC is pretty much going out the door. Radio Shack's gone. Of course, Blockbuster and all this. So as businesses go out, there's more businesses coming in and on the up. So where do you see the trends? Because I always say that, the trends are your friends. So where do you see the trends going in franchising in the next 12 months?
I just had coffee with a tech friend of mine who is all into AI, and he was telling me what the world's going to look like in 5 years, what the world's going to look like in 10 years because of AI. And you know what he said to me, Richard, that was exciting? He goes, franchising is in the best spot because all these home service brands, all these service-based brands are going to do just fine because they're all needed services. Big box restaurants, as you already saw through the pandemic, had major problems. People couldn't figure out, people truly couldn't figure out how to handle themselves in these scenarios through the pandemic. And big box is not the place to be, which is why all these fast casual restaurants came about. And that's truly what I love, is the fast casual space. Brands like, Five Guys and Panera Bread and, Chipotle. But the big box players, when you talk about the future, all the customers listening to this, still want an experience when we go out. And it's still going to be about the experience, still going to be about customer service. If brands cannot deliver customer service like we're seeing in the supermarkets, we're going to end up with food delivered to the house. Is there an experience at supermarkets anymore? Franchising, you still need somebody to fix your toilet. You still need somebody to do your electrical. You need a handy person. You need your haircut. Last time I checked, you're not going to have Amazon cut your hair. Maybe that's coming 20 years from now, but it's not coming tomorrow. Hopefully that answers.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, like, for me, I lived down south for 20 years. I'm a big Chick-fil-A guy. Their customer service is above anybody else. When I buy my stuff for my guitars, I order from Sweetwater online because they treat you, your customer service is out of this world. So what you're saying is, if you're in a smaller business, if your customer service is above everybody else's, you're going to succeed just by being excellent customer service.
It is all about the customer service and the overall experience and the follow-up. The amount of technology that brands invest, the amount of technology that franchise brands are investing in making sure they answer the phone that much quicker, they communicate to customers that much quicker, they follow up with customers that much quicker. It's amazing. I have one group, Neighborly Brands. They own about 17 franchise brands, mostly home type services. When you're a new franchisee, they'll send out postcards to various zip codes and say, you've used our services across all these other franchisees. Now we have Mr. Appliance. Richard's the new franchisee. Call on Richard anytime you need anything. It's that personalization. It's that customer service that you're not going to get from a lot of other businesses. A lot of creative marketing.
And don't you think, and as we're winding down, everybody's starting to get into the AI game.
Yes.
And of course, I use AI. I use ChatGPT for AI, so I'm not afraid to say it. Because my lawyer has an assistant, my doctor has an assistant. ChatGPT is my assistant, but it's not my crutch. So I use it as an assistant. But I think, like, for when we hang up, I'm going to ask you for your mailing address, and I'm going to send you a handwritten thank you card. And I'm going to send you some stuff, just because that's what sets me apart from every Joe and Schmo that has a podcast, because I want to create that relationship. And I think even though it's an AI world, I think the more relationship wise you are, the more successful you're going to be now.
Yep, absolutely. No, I agree with you 100%. It's whatever sets you apart. It's really what it comes down to. And in the world of franchising, they are always innovating. And the beauty of a franchise, when you get into the right one, is they're going to be thinking, they're going to be the guys up all night in the R&D department and the tech folks. How do we stay on top? And if you don't feel like they're staying on top, you sell and move on to another business. Not a big deal.
So now if Joe Schmo, Private Joe Schmo, just gets out of the military and wants to get in touch with you, how does he get in touch with you, Mr. Lance, the man, the myth, the legend?
Well, Lance Graulich is what I am on Instagram, lance.graulich. Deven would kill me for not saying this. I have a free assessment on my website at lancegraulich.com, or you can just send me a DM on Instagram, and the DM simply say, well, do you want to do Richard? Let's do resiliency. Text me resiliency. And I'll send you the link for my free assessment. My free assessment helps you and me understand, based on your mindset, skill set, and life experiences, what brands might be best for you.
I love it. And guys, if you have a podcast, you want to get in touch with Deven Rodriguez, he's the man. He will get you the top guests like Lance come on your show. So make sure if you're a podcast host, definitely reach out to Deven Rodriguez. Awesome. Lance, my brother, I'm so grateful that we finally got a chance to hang out.
I'll come to Jersey someday and see you. I can't wait.
Yeah, brother. Like I said, I'll even take a ride up to Long Island, hang out sometime, especially in the springtime. It's a great place to be.
It is. It is.
And we come out whenever we go out. I want to go out to Vegas because my wife's a big Barry Manilow fan, and
love it.
And we went to see him at the it used to be the Las Vegas Hilton. Now it's Westgate. So I want to take her again. So when I come out, we'll go have dinner together.
Real men love Manilow.
That's it. All right, Lance, my brother, have an amazing week, and thank you for everything.
Take care, Richard. Thank you.